Hi there.
How are
I'm
you?
doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I definitely haven't seen you in more than a decade.
It's been a very long time. And
It's been a long time.
because we were
But
rehearsal at the same time. You were on the television
yes,
side and I was in features. And so our
yes,
cross of it, oh my God, that was like 10 years ago.
yeah, definitely. It was like I think I left in 2010, and so it's 2020 now.
And see, that's
So yeah, it's been that long. Well, that's exciting to see where your career has gone. So I'm not going to introduce you because that's going to be a part of what you do. So I'm going to leave that part to you. But I always like to explain the rules to everyone. Welcome to How the F Do I Make It in Hollywood? I've been doing this live IG seminar series for I don't even know how many weeks now, but definitely more than a month. Like we might be on 6 weeks,
Mhm.
something like that. Because everybody always wants to know, like, how do I get in? And most of my clients are writers.
Nice.
However, one of the things that I tell people all the time is if you knew about what other positions there were in the industry, you might decide that writing isn't the thing that you want to do. Maybe you're interested in being an executive, or maybe you want to be a director, or maybe you want to, do other things. So I try to have people who do different things come in, but also since I do have mostly writers, people who can kind of learn something about the process, especially the business side,
Yes.
because we learn all this creative stuff, but we never know what goes on the other side. So thank you so much for being here with us. So the rules are, guys, today, hold on, I'll always go in close like this. Today is not about you pitching
I love
anyone. We're not here to hear your ideas. We're not here to go, well, I have this thing going on. I mean, can I get a meeting? That is not what today is about.
I
Keep it to
love
yourself. Today is about process. Today is about journey. And so any questions that you may have on process or journey, feel free to drop them in when we get to that part. But this is not about your idea. Okay, so keep that part to yourself. Anyway, so let's jump in because Instagram is gonna cut us off at an hour. But guess what, guys? I have been rolled into the update that I can save my lives as IGTV.
what?
So yes, now I haven't tried it with two people yet because usually if I do this by myself, I get an option to download it. But
Okay.
if I add another person in, then I don't get that option anymore. And I don't know if it's because you may not, like your side may not agree that I get to download. So I don't know. But yesterday I did a live and it kept pausing. So hopefully it doesn't do that today. But when I was done,
Mhm.
it gave me three options: delete, download, or add to IGTV. So it doesn't even stay in your stories
Mhm.
anymore like it used to. So it should go to IGTV. So we're going to keep our everything crossed, guys, that this will save there. And if not, I will download it to my phone at least. Hopefully it'll give me that option.
Okay.
And then it'll be there for you guys to see it. So anyway, so let's get into this, Heather. We're going to start with your backstory. Tell us where you're
Sure.
from, how you got here,
Mhm.
why this industry. If you were doing something before this industry, what was that? And then what was that transition into getting into the industry?
Sure. I am originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I moved here to LA in 2010, so it's been 10 years now, and it's been a fun ride.
Wow.
I have a very non-traditional path. Most people in the business go to film school or they work as an assistant for several years and then work their way up. But I actually used to be an attorney. I practiced law. I went to the University of Pennsylvania for law school. I went to Howard for undergrad. But I went to UPenn for law school. And after law school, I moved back home to Atlanta and I practiced law. And my goal was to practice entertainment law because I always had this big interest in the field of entertainment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that didn't really work out. All the job opportunities that were offered were in corporate law. I did that for 3 years and I wasn't really fulfilled by it. So I decided that I was going to dig deep and really, explore what are my passions? What are those things I've been interested in for my entire life? And after
Yeah.
doing that, I realized it was film. And so I started doing research. I went to more festivals. I was already going to some festivals on my own, but I went to even more. I
So
went
is this while you're still in Pennsylvania?
where I'm still in Atlanta practicing law.
Oh, Atlanta. Okay.
And I met as many people as I possibly could. And I sat in on every workshop, every seminar, every panel. And then I started making trips to LA and networking and meeting with different people in different roles and learning about what they did. So agents and managers and executives and producers and writers and directors. And that was all research for me. I was figuring out what I wanted to do with my life by asking them questions about what they did and trying to figure out what best suited my interests and my goals. And after a few years of doing that, I decided I was just going to take a chance and just move to LA and just hope for the best. I got incredible.
Did you have a job already?
I did not have a job. I was young and just ambitious and hungry. I was in the process of applying for a job at Universal Pictures. And it was a 3-round interview process. And I had completed the first 2 rounds. And I felt pretty good about it. I'm like, if they keep calling me back in for interviews, then I think there might be something there. And so after the second interview, I decided to move to LA. Thankfully, I got that job. And it was in the Universal Pictures Leadership Program, which was essentially a studio executive training program. And it was perfect for me. It was made for people from diverse backgrounds, both in terms of ethnicity, but also in what their professional experience was. Right. So it was for JDs and MBAs and other executive types that were interested in being a studio executive. And it was set up as a rotational program. So I made rotations throughout the studio, starting off in publicity at Focus Features, and then doing marketing at Universal, both digital marketing and multicultural marketing. And then my very last rotation was in production development, working on genre films for a pod that they had called Sci-Fi Films. And I was just amazed that people were paid to read scripts and watch movies and sit in these creative meetings every day and brainstorm film ideas. I was like, wow, they pay you to do. I felt so happy in that moment because I had finally figured out what I wanted to do with my life. And when I came out of that program, Universal Pictures hired me to stay on and to manage a writer's program that they had just launched. And so I launched that program. I brought in 3 classes of writers, and it was an amazing experience as well, because that program was set up so that we could identify diverse writers who did not yet have that studio experience or have a manager or an agent, and give them their first opportunity to work in the business and give them mentorship and help them find a representative and give them actual studio projects, scripts that they were working on, get notes from the executives throughout the process. And so I brought in 3 classes of writers. And after managing that program for 4 years, I decided that I wanted to get more experience on the production side. And I heard that Will Packer was looking for a development executive. And so I joined his company in 2017, and I've been here for 3 years now.
Wow. Wow. I don't know why I thought you were going to have some other stuff in between there. Awesome. Okay, so let's go back to being in that program.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a lot of people come out to LA and we have this dream of what we want to be, but we know we don't get straight there. So sometimes we end up taking jobs in what we feel like is outside of why we're here. And so you being in that program and having to go into the marketing department, into the digital department and all these other departments, what kind of transferable skills, and I know you were in a different place because you knew you were coming from law to entertainment. So you were just open and ready to accept anything that was coming. But what kind of transferable skills do you feel like you learned in all of those places to be able to take it into being an executive?
Now, so much, because, you know, first of all, it was about the relationships that I was able to obtain in that program at Universal, because Will Packer's deal is at Universal. And so I still know all the executives that I worked with in marketing and publicity and the development team. And so being able to carry on those relationships and continue them, I think that helps a lot in the role that I have. Also understanding the culture and the way that they do things at Universal, it helps as well. But being a producer, I think it helps tremendously to understand marketing, because whatever you make, you need to market it to film audiences. You need to understand what would be something that they would find, you know, immediately interesting, that they would be curious to actually go to the theaters and see when it opens. And so thinking like a marketing person and already starting to figure out, okay, who would we market this film to? Who would be interested in seeing this? This helps you as a producer when you're hearing pitches and you're reading scripts and you're deciding what project you want to develop further.
Yeah, that is cool, because I think a lot of people don't realize all of the things that encompass being a producer. Yeah. And all of the skills that you have to have. I tell my clients all the time, y'all got all these titles in your Instagram profile, and you don't really know what those titles mean and what kind of skills actually go into those things. You know, they're like, oh, I helped with locations one day. producer. It's like, bruh. It's like, bruh. So, so having those marketing skills have been helpful to you in producing. Awesome.
Sure.
Now, so when you then became over this writing program, being someone who didn't come from a writing place, what was that like for you? And what did you learn then that kind of helps you now when you're working with writers?
Well, when I was first, when I first came to LA, one of the things that I did, even before I arrived, I started taking writing and producing classes because I knew that I was interested in this business. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to make movies. So even in Atlanta and when I moved to LA, I was taking writing and producing courses just so I would understand film development and story. So I took like Robert McKee's course, and I took some classes back in Atlanta before I moved here. I read every book that I could get my hands on because I wanted to understand the business. And so that helped tremendously when we started the writers program. But also, of course, like we brought in actual veteran writers to teach our seminars and our classes to the writers. And it's not just the fundamentals of writing, but also what life is like as a writer, balancing your workload and how to handle yourself in a pitch, and how to manage the relationship with the producer and the executives. We had experienced veteran writers that had worked with the studio for years come in and give the writers insight on that. So I was really facilitating it and bringing in the right people that they needed to hear from when it came to that part of it.
Yeah. As a production, as a director, so now you're director of development, or are you director of production, or are they the same thing at Will Packer's company?
Will Packer. So director of production development on the feature side.
Okay, great. So as a production development person, and I probably should ask this other question first, but I'm not going to because this was on my mind. As a production development person, do you give notes to writers? And if so, what's your processing with giving notes? Where are you coming from as a production development person when you're giving notes to writers?
Yes. Well, I mean, giving notes is one of the most time-consuming parts of my job. And if you decide that you want to be a development executive, you have to love reading scripts. You just really need to love it. You need to enjoy the entire process of development, from reading a ton of submissions, finding the material that speaks to what the company is looking for at that time. Also reading sample scripts and figuring out the right writers to bring on for open writing assignments that you have. That's all just reading as much as you can. And then once we get a script into development, yes, it is a lot of notes because you have to get it to a certain place where, A, it's something that you could put forth in front of the studio and they can see the potential in it. And then once it gets into development at the studio, you have to get it to a place where it can actually be made. And so it's a lot of rounds of giving notes. Sometimes we send out, extensive notes documents. Sometimes we jump on the phone and we give them notes. It's very specific. We break down everything from character to dialogue to plot to structure, the concept, and just really trying to make sure that really cool idea that they sold us on is being executed in a way in which it can be made at the studio level. Because Will Productions is a company that has a deal with a major studio. So we're always thinking high concept, big, something that feels like a film that you would want to pay money for to see in theaters. I mean, there are occasionally some smaller films that we do consider, but for the most part, we are making big studio films. And so it's really about elevating whatever idea was sold to us or we saw on the page when it was submitted and getting it to where it needs to be. For writers, my best piece of advice would be having a collaborative and kind spirit during that process.
That was great. A collaborative and kind spirit, everyone.
Because filmmaking is a very collaborative process. You're going to get notes from the executives at the production company, from the executives at the studio, from whatever director is brought on board, and then maybe sometimes the actor will give notes. And so being collaborative and open-minded and willing to hear feedback and advice, it's very helpful for everyone. And I think it makes the career of a writer even longer if they're known as the type of writer that can take a note and receive it. And even if they don't agree with it, consider it and maybe come back and say,
that's it. Just consider it. Exactly. Somebody said translation, don't be in your feelings. Exactly, because it's not personal at all. everybody has their job to do in this business, and doing their job affects your job, so on and so forth. So everybody's just coming in trying to do what they are getting paid to do. Like, this is not personal. You know what I'm saying? Nobody has time for that.
And writers have to keep in mind that the goal is just to make the very best film possible.
Right.
So it's working together as a team over a period of several months, sometimes years, to make the very best film possible. And a lot of that is being receptive to notes.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's your job as an executive to give the notes, but it's your job as the executive to make movies.
Yes.
So that means you're trying to make their movie.
Exactly.
You're not coming in to steal their joy. You're not coming in to make them feel like terrible people. You're not, you're there because you actually want to get this made, because that's a reflection of your job, and to be able to get it all the way through the process.
And we want to bring that idea to life. And fortunately, during my time in this business, I've been so blessed that I've been able to work with a lot of writers that get it. And the process is just amazing when that happens. They just want to make a good film, and they understand that we do too. And so it's just a very collaborative and peaceful environment to work in. And that's just really enjoyable, because then you can just focus on the really fun parts of it.
Awesome. So I was supposed to ask this question first, but I didn't want to forget that last question. And you've basically said it already, but I always like to break things down just in case we have brand new people who are watching.
Okay.
What is a development executive? What does your day-to-day look like? And how is that different, because yours has production in the title as well, from maybe people who don't have production in their title?
Yes. So a development executive is one of the persons within a production company who's responsible for identifying and bringing in material to produce. So whether that is a script that's already written that's submitted to us, or if it's an idea that someone comes in to pitch, it's identifying the material that speaks to the brand, the vision of the company, and what the mandate is at that time. And that mandate changes from week to week, month to month. Our priorities change. In addition to identifying material, once the project goes into development, you have to usher it along. And so giving notes to the writer to make the script better. And then once we have a good script, identifying directors who might be interested in being a part of the project. And so going through your list and figuring out who has the experience and the taste that speaks to what we're doing, and submitting the project to them, and finding a director that we can collaborate on, setting it up at a studio, going through more notes, bringing on actors. And this is the part I love as well. A development executive is there from the very beginning all the way to the end.
Every single part of the process. And that's one of the reasons why I bring executives on here, because I have writers who think that they will be there for every single part of the process. And I'm like, it sounds like you want to be an executive, not a writer, honey. Your job is to write the screenplay.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Producer. And sometimes the writer is a producer, but if not, then they probably would not be involved for the entire process on that level. But yeah, so once we get the script where it needs to be and we have a director, the development executive is also very active in the casting process. So going to casting sessions and watching self-tapes and giving feedback to the director on people that stood out. And then there comes the production piece of it. And so once we get the green light, the development executive is there on set. At Will Packer Productions, we tend to shoot a lot of our movies in Atlanta, but we most recently shot a movie called The Photograph in New York, and that was a really fun experience. New York is a beautiful city. And
I bet it was different just because, it's a more of a commuter place. So just trying to get the permits to keep the people out. I'm sure it's different from shooting in Atlanta.
Oh, yes, it is. It is. It was very different. And we were there. It was still somewhat cold. It was like February through March. And so you're working through that as well. But yeah, the development executive is on set every day, just making sure that, we're staying on time and on budget, and that we're getting all the footage that we need. And then once we're done with the production, the development executive looks at the dailies and gives notes to the director and the editor about what we have, looks at several different takes of the film and gives notes on that as well. Sometimes, most of the time, we do test screenings in front of full audiences, and we'll take surveys of what they think of the film. The development executive goes through the surveys, reads them to see what are people liking, what don't they like, what don't they understand, what might we need to go back and get more footage of so people can get it. Then at the end, when it's time to market the film, the marketing department at the studio will send us several different posters and trailers, and we give our notes and feedback on that as well. So a development executive ushers the film from the very beginning to the very end.
Wow. And then you're probably doing it for several projects at a time. And if not, as soon as one is done, the next one is like the very next day, and you start all the way over again. So this is why, guys, I tell you that if your screenplay is not up to par, they don't have time to read your whole mess of a screenplay. They have a million things to do. So you want to have it in good enough shape so that they feel like they have the time. They want to give you the time. But if you're doing things like, I talked about this yesterday on live, like your formatting is incorrect, or you have a lot of proofreading errors. She ain't got time to be trying to figure out what you're saying to her. Capitalize things, use punctuation.
It can be very distracting, in all seriousness. Punctuation and spelling errors and, you know, characters that weren't introduced and suddenly appear. It can be very distracting, and it can take the executives away from the story that you're trying to tell. So I always tell writers, share your script with people that you trust and people that you know will give you honest feedback before you submit it to someone that you want to help you make it. So have a writer read it. Join a writer's group. That's a great way to get frequent feedback on your material. Have a manager or an agent that works with you or someone that you know read it to give you feedback. Get several rounds of notes before you submit it. So that way, whatever you submit is in the best shape possible. And make sure those first 30 pages are really compelling. You got to hook the reader. And that usually needs to take place by page 15 to 30. You really need to have something that just hooks them, engages them, and makes them want to finish reading your script that you've poured so much time and energy into. Yeah,
exactly. Because I mean, even like I try to compare it to just life, right? If we're watching something on TV and it hasn't gotten us by the first commercial break, or it hasn't gotten us, you know, within those first few minutes, we're scrolling on our phones now. We're not even paying attention. So if we're scrolling through Facebook and somebody wrote a long post, if those first 3 sentences don't speak to you, what are you doing? Scrolling on by. If a video plays, which is why Instagram has that whole thing where they show you just the first 15 seconds or just the first minute before you click the IGTV. Because if you watch that and you're like, oh, this is not for me, you keep scrolling. Exactly. So why do you think that anybody wants to read 100 pages before they get to the part that makes them feel something?
Exactly.
Nobody wants to do that. Everybody is looking to get instantly hooked, or, you know, understand who this character is, what they're trying to do, what the stakes are, why we're here, so that we can continue to read. But if not, then you're giving executives a reason, and all they need is one to say, I have other stuff to do. You know what I mean? You know. So people ask this question all the time, and since you're from Atlanta, you may be able to give us a little bit of a perspective. So I'm a writer. I live in, let's say, Mississippi. Did I move to Atlanta?
You could be a writer anywhere. That's the fortunate thing about writing. There is nothing and no one stopping you from doing it. As long as you have a computer and final draft, you can write, and you can do it wherever you live. I would say move to Atlanta if you're interested in also getting the production experience, and if you think it will help you on the networking side. Because as a writer, unless you're going to make your film independently, you can't do it alone. And so it helps to know people that are already in the business, whether it's directors or producers or actors or wardrobe people or anyone. It helps having that network. And Atlanta has become an amazing place to develop that foundation. It wasn't on that level when I was growing up. I think if it was, I might have gotten into this business sooner, because I would have already seen there's so many different jobs that you can have in film. It's not just being the actor or the director, but there's so many other positions,
so many jobs
and roles. And so I think Atlanta is a great training ground for people that are breaking into the industry, if you have the means to be there. If not, there's nothing stopping you from writing in Mississippi or wherever you live, going to film festivals and making connections, staying in touch with those people, building those relationships, and just taking it from there.
Yeah, great answer. My short answer for people is Atlanta is the place for production, but it hasn't quite got a development culture yet. So depending upon, what kind of writing you want to do, like obviously as a feature writer, you can be anywhere. But if people don't know you, then, it doesn't matter where you are. But as a television writer, that development process is a little bit different. And so you really need to be in the mix. That mix is just not in Atlanta yet. Like you said, 10 years ago, the production wasn't really there. So who knows where we'll be 10 years from now. But definitely a great production place. And so I did a panel last year about the development culture. So people are trying to get it there, but they've said things like that the agents aren't there, the managers aren't there, the executives aren't there. So the development is not there.
Exactly. And the writers' rooms, if you're in TV, most writers' rooms are in LA or New York. And like you said, the representatives, the agents, and the managers, and then when you're ready to pitch, most production companies are in LA, and there's still a few in New York. So when you're at that point where you're wanting to go out and pitch or be in a writer's room, then you would have to make a decision. Where do I want to live? And LA is best for that when you're at that point. But early on, you're still learning, you're still developing your craft and finding your voice as a writer and figuring out what you want to say and what genres you're most interested in. I think you can pretty much do that anywhere early on.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because I think you said something about this, or even the program that you were in. My program was similar, but not. It was the Entertainment Associates program. Yeah. And it was also a fast track to executive life, but we didn't get to jump around. We just were put in one place, and that's where we stayed the whole time. But before then, I had, been a production assistant, a first AD, a second AD, a blah, blah, blah. And I think it's great for writers to take on those roles so they can see what the other sides of the process looks like, so they can know what they're asking for when they're writing their screenplays and they're, putting in explosions and all these other things. It's like, do you really understand what you're asking for? Now, you're at a big enough place where you guys have a budget to do some of these kind of things, but not all, production companies have those kind of budgets. And a lot of times writers are trying to write what they think looks the best, but they aren't really considering, well, the budget and, anything else that can be done. So
yeah, for sure.
Okay. So a couple of people have asked some questions so far. One of them from earlier was, do you need to be a lawyer to look into that universal leadership program? Does it still exist?
No. So sadly, the program is on hiatus. I really hope that they bring it back because it completely changed the trajectory of my professional life. It helped me figure out what exactly I was interested in this filmmaking business. And I established some really cool relationships with people that I'm still very much in touch with today. But sadly, it's in hiatus. If you go on the NBC Uni Careers website, you could look around and see what other types of positions similar to that they have, and also just continue to check to see if they bring it back. But it was a universal leadership program. And no, you do not have to have a JD to be in it. It was for people that have masters or, graduate degrees. That's the one stipulation, but it could be in any field, but you did have to have an advanced degree in order to qualify.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't think I knew about that program when I applied to the Entertainment Associates program. And when I applied, I didn't even know what development meant. I had no idea what it meant. And I was in film school. Okay. I was in film school and I did not know what development meant. But I knew that I wanted to be that person who was reading scripts and giving notes. Like that's the part that I knew. So when I read what the program was going to be and it had that in there, I was like, great. So I'm going to apply for this because that's the part that I know I want to do. I had no idea that I would be doing marketing and digital and casting and all of these other things. I had no idea. So it was really a crash course in the whole industry, which is what I like about being an executive, that you are able to be there.
I didn't really know for sure what a development executive did when I got into that program either. But what helped me, I started researching people that were doing what I wanted to do. And came across this woman who's a producer who used to be an attorney, and her name is Deborah Martin Chase, and she's gone on to produce amazing films. Most recently, she did the Harriet Tubman film that got all the big nominations. And I saw she was a lawyer, and she made a transition from law to film. And I literally just started going on the internet and trying to figure out, well, how did she make that leap? And I found out she did a studio executive training program at ABC that they no longer had when I was looking into the business, but I found something similar to it at Universal and applied for that. So sometimes it's just researching people that are doing the job that you want. And you don't meet them, and I still haven't had the honor of meeting Deborah yet. But even if you don't meet them, you can still learn so much about their path and figure out what route they took and how things worked out for them, and figure out what might work for you.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? For whatever reason, a lot of studios and networks don't seem to have their executive programs anymore. And I don't know what that is particularly about, but there are millions of writing programs and acting programs and directing programs at all of the studios. So a lot of the times when people are like, well, where should I start? And it's like, look, every studio or network has some kind of program for most of those above the line kind of positions. Producer programs, they have all of those kind of positions. But for whatever reason, the executive ones just aren't really around that much anymore.
Yeah, not as many, but they make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So someone asked, how often do you guys at Will Packer Productions, or maybe even when you were at Universal, how often do you guys find content from film festivals?
You know, it really depends on the production company. At Will Packer Productions, we don't typically go to film festivals for that reason in terms of acquisitions. I know Universal does. They have a whole team at both Universal and Focus Features that does that, but that's not something that we typically do at Will Packer Productions. It really depends on the company. But film festivals have been really helpful to us in helping us identify that next writer or director that we need to be in business with. We see all the material, the agents and the managers send it out to us. And by looking at those films, we know, like, this person is special. This person has talent. This is someone that needs to be on our list. We set general meetings with them when everyone comes back to LA, and we start building a relationship, and those writers and directors become part of the family.
That's great. You hear that, folks? It's not always, I say this all the time, and I'm going to say it again, it's not always about winning the competition. You don't know who is looking at your stuff. Which is why the film festivals that you decide to participate in matter. If they're not going to be able to get your content in front of the right eyes, right? Because the point of the film festival is so that you can meet people, right? Because you're on the outside and you're trying to get a seat at the table, right? So you never know who's reading the screenplays that are submitted and who is looking at the films that are submitted. It's not always about winning.
That is so true. That is so true. And not just with the film festivals, but also the screenplay competitions. It's not just the person that actually wins the competition, but even people that make it to the semifinalists and the finalist round gets exposure, and agents and managers reach out to them, and executives get exposure to those scripts as well. And so those are just different ways to get your name out there and for people to recognize that what your talent is and to reach out and engage.
Yeah, definitely. All right, next question is, do you still get to express creativity as an executive?
Oh, yes, yes. Especially at the company at Will Packer Productions, it is a smaller production company. And so everyone has a voice and everyone is very much involved in our projects. At our staff meetings, sometimes we help, brainstorm ideas that the TV department has or ideas that the feature department has. We'll all chime in and give our input about what we think should happen. But specifically for feature film, it is being a development executive is a very creative job, because you are there for the development of the film from the very beginning to the very end. So you're giving your feedback, your thoughts, and your opinions on every aspect of the film, from, how the character should look, what they should say, what their motivation is, what the poster should look like, what the trailer should look like, what type of marketing material we should put out, like for Girls Trip, we did like some really fun necklaces and stuff like that. The production company is involved in all of that. So very creative job. And that's something that got me really interested in this side of the business. After doing my research and meeting with agents and managers and lawyers, I realized that development executives are really there at the foundation from the very beginning, developing the movie. So that's the most creative aspect of the job, other than being a writer or director. So that's interested in this particular position.
Yeah, and you're using so many different parts of your brain.
Yes, You are. You are. And surprisingly, even my background as a lawyer helps in the job I have today. Because as a lawyer, one of the most important training skills that you receive is knowing when to ask questions and what questions to ask, risk assessment, and always planning for the what ifs. And that comes in so much, it's very handy in this role as a producer, because you're constantly thinking, okay, well, what if this happens? What is our backup plan? If we lose this location, or if it rains, or if this actor gets sick, like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, problem solving.
Exactly. You're constantly thinking in that way, and that helps as a producer. And even though I came from the outside, I think it helped being a lawyer because I knew what questions to ask, and I wasn't afraid to ask them. And I think that applies to anything, but especially when you're first getting into a business, having the courage to ask questions and knowing which questions will help you figure things out for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to that, I think, and what a lot of people don't realize that we didn't have 10 years ago is Google is your friend. You know what I mean? There is so much information out there about everything. And so when you do have the opportunity to ask those questions, consider doing the research first, because there's so many people who are trying to get into this industry that you're looking to, your respect level is going to start here, and then people are going to realize you're not that serious about this thing, right? Because you're asking me a question that you can Google.
That is true.
That you can find for yourself. And because people in this industry, everybody knows money is power, right? This industry runs on money. We lose dollars by the moment, or we make dollars by the moment. So that means everybody is moving, everybody is shaking. So if somebody stops to give you their time, the questions that you ask have to be ones that are not easily accessible for you. And Google makes everything easily accessible. I will even say, sometimes people ask me a question, I don't know the answer. Guess where I go find it? Google. Because if enough people know, and I know a couple of websites that I trust at this point, right? So if I get the answer from this place and they say the same thing over here and they say the same thing over here, then I'm going to start to assume, okay, this is probably how that process works. I also go ahead.
You want to be prepared. You want to ask the right questions, especially if it's a setting in which you're new to a job. You want to show that you've already done the research and the reading ahead of time. So whatever questions you have, they're the appropriate type of questions to ask your boss or your supervisor, and to take up their time with that. And also for writers, something that I would say when you start going out for general meetings, when you're sitting down with executives, already do your research on the company. Watch their films, have an understanding of their brand, and be prepared. Know a little bit about the executives. So when you come in, you can ask deeper questions. You can ask things like, what are you looking for right now? What is your need? What is your priority right now? So that way you already have some information. So when you come, you're prepared, and the conversation can get even deeper, and you can really truly get something out of it.
And even on just a more real level, we can take you more seriously.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because we know you're taking your craft seriously. But if you're coming in to ask a question that it's like, if I decide to do a Google search, it's literally the first thing that comes up, like the answer, then I'm going to think you didn't do any research whatsoever, and you're expecting that you're just going to have someone to pull you by the hand all the way through. Exactly. And there are way too many people who are grinding in this industry who are going to just continue to climb because they're doing some of that work themselves. And so they are ready with deeper questions by the time they get in the room with someone like you. Let's see. So this question is basically, what do you think people are going to be looking for post-COVID? Or I guess during COVID? Are people going to be over talking about dystopian pandemic kind of stuff, or are people going to be looking for that kind of stuff?
I don't think so. I think we'll probably see a lot of stories that are inspired by the pandemic and the quarantine, because I feel like a lot of people, after you take the time to make sure you're well, both physically and mentally, a lot of people are also taking the time to be creative. And I think we'll see a lot of stories come out that are inspired by this world that we're living in right now, and maybe predicting how the world will change after.
So I keep checking the time because I don't want it to cut off on us. But we have 20 minutes, so we're good. So people always want to know this, and I think it's a great question for someone like you who has to listen to pitches all the time. So what are some of the things, I'm trying to figure out if I want to ask the positive connotation or the negative connotation of the question. So I'll just leave it this way. What's your advice? They're coming in to pitch. They got this meeting with you. You've given them a 30-minute slot.
Yeah.
Or, whatever. What's your advice for when they come into the room?
Number one, your pitch should not be too long. I think anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes is a sweet spot, because then you have enough time to really flesh out, the lead character, acts 1, 2, and 3, and tell a complete story, but also maintain the interest of your audience by it just not being too long. At the top of the pitch, I think you should express what personally attracts you to this story. What in your own life and experiences or interests makes you the person to tell this story? Why is something that you're passionate about telling? I think having something that conceptually feels like it has to be made, and thinking big. Thinking, is this a film that people would want to come out to theaters to see? And if so, why? It needs to be high concept. It needs to be interesting. It needs to be engaging. The inciting incident needs to be clear. The message that you're trying to make, your statement as a writer, needs to be clear. And the themes should be clear as well. Having in mind actors that you think would fit this role. I think sometimes it's interesting to hear like who you are inspired by, who you think would be able to nail it, because it helps the producer to be able to visualize like, oh, this could be a movie. This could be interesting. All those things are really important, but I think most importantly, just speaking with passion and with heart and telling stories that you're really interested about. I always tell writers to be careful about following trends. Like, oh, I hear this is hot and everybody's looking for this type of film right now. Because then you can find yourself just like running after tropes and cliches and not really being true to who you are. I think the most interesting skill set that a writer can bring to their craft is their personal experience, their passions, their lessons, their challenges, the things that they've overcome, the things that motivate them. I think that makes a story stronger because it feels more authentic. It feels more relatable. So really just focusing on your passion and bringing something to the studio or the production company that really speaks to who you are.
Right. Because if they're not passionate about it, why should you be?
Exactly. Exactly.
Why do you want to sign up for this, what could be years long process, for some work that the other person isn't passionate about? Okay, here's a question. Is your success measured by box office numbers, or are there other contributing factors?
That's a good question. Box office numbers is definitely a huge part of how you measure the success of a film. But also sometimes you have to look at, what did it say for the culture? What statement did it make? What does it inspire? What artistic merit or value came out of it? I think all of those things are factored into it as well. There are some films that you can go back and you can look that were made years ago that maybe didn't do that well in the box office, but they became classics. They became films that people always reference. So, box office is a very large part of it, but also there are other things such as artistic merit and value and what you have to say and how it sticks with people. I think for me, I love films that just don't leave me when the movie is over. I love films that make me wonder, like, why did the character do that? Or what if the character had done this? Or what inspired the writer or the director to go there? I love those types of films. One film that I really loved recently, I talk about a lot, is Parasite, because the movie was just so unexpected for me. It was so it was both funny, but also it had something important to say about classism and socioeconomics and how we treat each other. And so it just touched a lot of different points to me. It just really left an impression, and it's something that I enjoy watching over and over again.
Yeah, and I think, no matter how much our industry is run by the dollar, if only dollars mattered, we'd all quit. We'd all be driving ourselves crazy because it's such a subjective kind of industry that you never know how the people are going to respond to it. So you have to be in it for some other reason. I mean, there are plenty, like you said, plenty of people who've been making films forever, but they don't necessarily become box office hits.
Exactly.
You know, so if that's like the one thing that they were looking for, then they would have shut down their production company, shut down their studio, stopped acting, stopped writing, stopped doing, you know, all of those things. So we have to be in it for something, you know, a little bit more than that.
Exactly.
So what's next for you? What are your goals? What else do you aspire to do in this industry?
I love producing. It is fun. It taps into all of my creative juices and energy, and I get to travel and work with interesting people and work on projects that I believe in, and push for things that are important to me, like increasing diversity both in front of and behind the camera, and showing stories of color that haven't been shown before, a different way into our perspective, showing that we're very multifaceted, multi-layered, complex people, and there's a lot of different perspectives. My Atlanta story could actually be very different from someone else's Atlanta story, you know? I love that aspect of my job. So I see myself doing that for quite some time.
That is awesome. So before we leave, let's see what we got. What's my time? Great, we still have a little time. So if you guys have some other questions, you can put them in at the bottom.
Okay.
So people are always wondering, how do they contact people like yourself? What are some of your do's and don'ts for contacting people about your career or about their content, etc.?
Okay. Well, I think if you're trying to submit a script, it would have to come from an agent, a manager, or a lawyer. So if you have a representative, it's best to go through that person and ask that person to submit on your behalf. And we have strong relationships with all the representatives throughout town. So that's a really easy way to get your script through us, is through your rep. If you're trying to meet for like a general, you know, reaching out to someone that you know that knows us and asking for an introduction. I'm always open to meeting with people and giving advice, whether it's on the phone or in person, because there's been a lot of people that have helped me and mentored me and given me little short coffee meetings that have helped me realize something and spark something within me. So I'm always trying my best to reach back and help others. So I think those are the best ways. But yeah, we're pretty strict. Scripts have to come from a representative. And then we do, you know, go to industry events. And so that's another cool way to meet us, whether it's at screenings or, you know, some film festivals that we do attend locally. That's another good way.
Let's see, making sure I'm not missing anything. I would like to ask. Or initial. Okay, so did computer science translate for you into this industry at all?
That's a hilarious question, because I saw that it came from one of my classmates, Howard, who was also a computer science engineering major. You know what? I don't really use that skill a lot in my job, but I am forever grateful for the time that I had at Howard University. And
yes.
You all the way, because I really think that it helped mold me and develop me for this world that we live in. And I learned so much about myself and the people around me. And it was a beautiful experience. I pledged to AKA and I made some amazing friends, and I go back for homecoming. So, but no, I don't use my computer science degree anymore.
I went to HU homecoming maybe once or twice. I was living in when I left NBC Universal. That's where I went to DC. So I was there for 8 years. So I just got back here 2 years ago, and so I would go to Howard homecoming a couple of times. And y'all, the people are everywhere. Okay.
Yes.
The people.
Yes.
Are everywhere.
And those
it's like, okay.
that I made, they're important. There's a lot of Howard people that are in the business, living in LA now, and so you just never know when you're going to meet someone and your paths across again. I actually hired some writer friends that I went to Howard with. They worked on a script for us, and that was a really cool experience. So you never know. Those connections are important.
They really are, and I agree. Like, nobody makes it through this industry by themselves. No one. Mostly because it is a who you know kind of industry. So you're always looking to make a connection with someone, and you never know where that connection is going to come. So that's another reason why I say, you know, you're not always looking for the yes. You're not always looking for the win. What you're getting out of that thing may just be the connection that will circle back to you.
Exactly.
Who knows when?
Mm-hmm.
So like stuff like taking, coffee meetings and, having first of all, just being a decent person. You know what I'm saying? And sure, there are a lot of crazy people in Hollywood, but if you're a decent person and you have kept a relationship, and that relationship doesn't mean that you're sending me an email or a card every Christmas. You know what I mean? It just means I know you, you know me, we're decent people. And now one day you have some kind of project and you're like, I know someone.
Exactly.
And that's the person you decide to call. And you haven't talked to that person and you didn't read their script 10 years ago and all these other things, but you know who they are. You know they're decent. You know what they're trying to do in this industry. And all we're doing is connecting the dots and hooking people up.
Sometimes it's as simple as when you see someone's name in the trades that you've met with previously, just reaching out and saying, hey, I read about this film that you got greenlit. Congratulations. That sounds good. It's so simple. It takes 2 minutes of your time, but you're maintaining a relationship in a positive way and showing someone that you're paying attention and you appreciate what you're doing, what they're doing. You're inspired by it. That just helps to keep the connection there.
Right. Because in LA, a lot of people, especially those of us who are from the South, we find a lot of the relationships can be superficial, that people are, if you can't do anything for me in this moment right now, then we're not going to be friends. Right. But it's not about that at all. It's just about meeting people and making a human connection. And from there, again, you never know where these things are going to come back. Like if we even think like people who are around our age and maybe a little bit older, but who kind of started in the industry at the same time. And now they're all at a place where it looks like, oh, was that planned? We all just, friends and then just pulled each other up. But it's like, no, we were in this industry at the same time.
Exactly.
We made our connections and we just kept them. And now we're here. And now Ava can call Justin and Justin can call Lena. And this, and it's just because people kept those relationships. It wasn't about like, oh, I'm gonna keep this relationship because I know you're going somewhere. It's like, no, we're all working together and we're all making connections.
That is so true.
Someone said, so what's the best trade to read?
One. Every day I read Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, and Variety. I read those 3 every single day. And it's important.
And do you still get the paper? You still get the paper copy?
I look at them online every morning, either when I first, I try not to look at them in bed when I first wake up, but sometimes I do, or when I first get to my desk. But it's important. As a development executive, you need to know what else is out there, who's developing what the studio is looking for, what the trends are, what the concerns are, what areas aren't doing so well, the business side of it, especially now as people are looking at different models for going back to work after the pandemic. I'm reading articles every day, just trying to understand what are the risks, what are the concerns, how are we preparing ourselves as an industry, and who's saying what about what steps we should take. But also as a writer, you need to read those trades every single day, because then you'll know like what directors are doing what that I might be interested in working with at some point, what producers are doing what, because that'll give you a sense of what their taste is and what they might be looking for. Also as a writer, the different trades will announce when the registration has started for different competitions or fellowship programs. And so that's a good way to get that information early on so you can get your application package ready so you can apply as soon as it opens up. So it's important that you read the trades every single day. And I find it to be entertaining. It's not me because I'm reading about the things that are relevant to what I'm interested in, and it's informative. And I feel like it helps me. As I'm sitting in staff meetings or I'm reading material, it helps me to just be more aware of the world around me.
Yeah, and that's a part of your job. It's a part of your job to know. And as writers, it's a part of your job to know because she talked about earlier trends, right? And so you get to see the trend of what's always being purchased or what's being purchased right now. You get to say to yourself, okay, I'm writing something like that right now. Should I still be going into that space or should I be looking into something else? There's so much information out there for you. And one of the reasons I do this is because we don't even realize what information is out there, right? But like the trades have so much information and you'll be reading the same things that your executives are reading, that the producers are reading, that the agents are reading, that the managers are reading, and now you have the same information that they have.
Exactly.
Yes.
I completely agree.
So Sabrina asked, what's a fellowship program? And I'm glad that you asked that, because not next week, but the week after that, I'm going to have someone on who has been in a fellowship program. His name is Darnell Brown. He was in the HBO Access program.
Nice.
And he's going to talk about how you fill out all of the paperwork, how you write the personal statements and the bios and the resumes, and what fellowship programs look like. But if you want, Heather, you can give her like a quick definition of what does that mean? What's a fellowship program?
So a fellowship program is essentially it's a paid job experience at a studio or network. They have them typically for writers and directors. They also have some for studio executives. So the one that I managed at Universal, it was called the Universal Pictures Emerging Writers Fellowship Program. And we would bring on 5 writers every year. We would pay them for 1 year to come and work and write exclusively at the studio. And we would give them assignments, and they would complete those scripts while they were in the program. They also got mentors, and we set up panels and, workshops and things of that nature for them. And we took them on a tour of the Writers Guild so they could learn what they could offer to them. But all the different studios and networks have programs like that, either for writers, directors, or producers. And it's an amazing way to get experience and make contacts and also get paid.
Yes, get paid. Guys, get paid while you're doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And apply over and over and over again. A lot of the fellowship programs don't take a lot of people, but that's because you don't want to be in a room with 200 people, right? There's going to be 5 people, maybe 10 people. It's probably not going to get any bigger than that, but that's because it's about the one-on-one experience that you're supposed to have during this time that you're getting paid to be there. So if you don't make it in, apply again and again and again. A lot of people who are now at the top of their game applied for their fellowship programs 4, 5, 6 times before they got in. So there's no, there's nothing negative about needing to reapply. Imagine it's 1 million people who are applying, guys. So, they're only picking a few people, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn from what you did that year and apply the next year.
And be better and more prepared the next year.
Yeah, exactly. And be better and more prepared.
Those programs are highly competitive. But I do know people that have applied several times and made it in after the 3rd or the 4th attempt.
Right. And because they also remember you and they can watch your progress.
Exactly. They do. And I'll just say, every time you get a rejection, and I'm stealing this from Suzanne DePass, who I was able to have lunch with a few years ago, and she said, Heather, you have to consider a rejection as your vitamin. It is something to nurture you and help you grow as whatever it is that you're trying to be. It does not mean that's the end of your career. It does not mean that there is no opportunity for you to make it in this world of film. It just means that you still have some development or some growth to do. And that rejection that you received should be some form of nourishment to help you push and continue on and learn from it. If there's an opportunity to ask for feedback, ask if you can have it. Don't be weird about it. I would appreciate feedback if you could give me any.
Right.
And be more prepared the next time around.
Yeah. Well, that is great. Thank you so much. It's going to count us down in a second. So thank you for giving your time today. Thank you for giving us all of this information. We've had people say that they learned so much today. Some people said this was their favorite of my seminar series. So congratulations. Yes. But thank you so much for being here. And guys, just keep checking out my Instagram page for things that I have coming up. I'll be teaching my online screenwriting structure course in June. So keep looking back for that. And I also have workshops and workbooks available on my website if you're having questions about your screenwriting right now. So thank y'all. Have a good day. And I'm going to try to save this in my IGTV. We're going to see if it works. Okay. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye. You too.
Bye.
Oh, man.